Hello, welcome to the Positive Posting Conversation, the show about how to have a better relationship with your dog and cat. I'm Zazie Todd, author of the books Bark, Wag and Purr, and creator of companion animal psychology blog. My co-host, Christy Benson, is a dog trainer and anthropologist, and she also works at the Academy for Dog Trainers. We can't give advice on your pet, so if you have concerns, see your dog trainer, cat behaviourist, or veterinarian as appropriate. Thanks for joining us today. This is the panel Caring for Dogs with Pilley Bianchi, Wendy Lyons Sunshine, and Carri Westgarth, PhD. It was recorded at BarkFest, the book festival for animal lovers, in September 2024. BarkFest celebrated the launch of my new book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful or Reactive Dog, which is out now. Bark and all of the books from the festival are available wherever books are sold. Well, that is about the best start you can have to a webinar. Happy
Awesome.
cat.
I'm currently scent marking on my microphone.
Okay. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us today. I'm so excited to welcome you to BarkFest. I'd love to know where you're joining us from, so please let us know in the chat. You can see we have, or hear that we have a cat with us too, again, so that's very nice. Just so you know who I am, first of all, I'm Zazie Todd. I'm the author of Wag, The Science of Making Your Dog Happy, Purr, The Science of Making Your Cat Happy, and my new book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful or Reactive Dog, which is available for pre-order now. And Alexis Devine, who's the author of Iron Bunny, said, Bark is the resource I wish I'd had before bringing my own sensitive and reactive dog home. Now, we've got three wonderful authors with us today. We're going to really enjoy hearing about their books. But before we get to that, I have a couple of things that are housekeeping. So this is being recorded. The recording will go out after 72 hours. That gives me time to check it before it goes out. Everyone who is here live, and it's great to see so many of you here live, everyone who is here live now has the chance to win a copy of one of the books, of the author's books, and also of Bark. And I will do the draw after the event and send an email to the person who's won. So you'll have to reply to give me your mailing address. And depending on location, it might be a print copy or an ebook. So that depends on where you are. But I will do that after the event. You'll see that there's a chat box and a Q&A box. If you've been to any of these events already, you know that we would like you to put questions in the Q&A box so that they're easy for us to find at the end. And if your question is for a specific author, please put their name at the start of the question. So we're joined today by my co-host, Christy. So most of you know Christy Benson as my co-host on our podcast, The Positive Posting Conversation. She's also a Northern anthropologist, an amazing dog trainer, and a staff member at the Academy for Dog Trainers. Hi, Christy.
Hello. I have Apricot with me today too, since he's becoming famous.
He's definitely becoming famous. Now he'll be famous for his his purr as well. So today we're joined by three authors. Pilley Bianchi is the author of For the Love of Dog, The Ultimate Relationship Guide, with New York Times illustrator Calum Heath, which is a delightful love letter to dogs. She's the youngest daughter of Dr. John W. Pilley, owner, teacher of Chaser the Border Collie. Known as the smartest dog in the world, Chaser has the largest formally tested language learning of any animal in the world. Bianchi has been a co-teacher, producer, writer, and media consultant for Chaser, and collaborated with her father and his co-writer Hilary Hintzman behind the scenes on the New York Times best-selling book, Chaser, Unlocking the Genius of the Dog Who Knows 1,000 Words. She's senior executive, producer, founder of the Chaser Initiative, a nonprofit dedicated to educating children K-12 about the legacy of John Pilley and Chaser, as well as promoting animal welfare science in collaboration with the University of Melbourne and Dr. Mia Cobb. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Zazie. This is such a great team.
I know, I'm thrilled. We're also joined by Wendy Lyons Sunshine, who is an award-winning writer and journalist who co-authored The Connected Child, Bring Hope and Healing to Your Adoptive Family, which is a bestseller that's been translated into multiple languages, and Raising the Challenging Child, How to Minimize Meltdowns, Reduce Conflict, and Increase Cooperation. She blogs about the human-dog bond for Psychology Today and is on the team at positively.com. Wendy has assisted at a local animal shelter, and she and her husband live with a rescue dog, an overgrown acre where they all enjoy watching wildlife. Tender Paws, How Science-Based Parenting Can Transform Our Relationship with Dogs, shows why and how gentle, positive parenting can help us raise happy, well-adjusted dogs. Thank you for joining us today. And our next author is Professor Carri Westgarth. Carri is chair in human-animal interaction at the University of Liverpool, with a passion for understanding the relationships we have with our pets. With a background in animal behavior and dog training, she's trained in veterinary epidemiology and human public health. Her research interests focus on the implications of dog ownership for human health and well-being, but also how owner management of their dogs can impact dog welfare. Her expertise on understanding and changing the behavior of dog owners is highly sought after, and she's also a full member of the Association of Pet Behavior Counsellors and founder of the Merseyside Dog Safety Partnership. The Happy Dog Owner is a fun and practical guide to improving you and your pet's well-being. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
So we're going to pose for a photo because we know that people like to get photos at these events. So if you could get your cameras ready, and we're going to hold up our books and just keep still on camera so that you can get a photo. And I'd be very grateful if someone would type in the chat to say you've got it when you've got it. Perfect. Thank you. Apricot on full display there. That's lovely. So the way this is going to work, we're going to do an individual interview with each author and have a reading from them, and then we'll have time for audience questions at the end. So remember to type your questions in the Q&A box, and we're going to start today with Pilley to talk about your book, Chaser the Border Collie. Sorry, For the Love of Dog, but we are going to talk about Chaser too. That's why
She's a big part. Yes,
he is. Yes. But
yes.
your book is a delightful story of our relationship with dogs. How did the book come about?
Wow, there was a long and winding road to this book, and I won't go through all of it. But this was the book that I had been working on with my father. That was the second book his publisher was wanting. So we had been coming up with something that was more prescriptive and a how-to for people, and then he ended up passing away unexpectedly. But he was 90, so um and then Chaser went about a year after him, so I was left with some great stories and material, but not really sure what to do with it now that the man and the dog were no longer with us. So um I ended up doing some spitballing sessions with my friends Kat Warren and Maria Goodavage, um about sort of brainstorming maybe the new book. We became friends through all of our connections to dogs, and decided that this should really be an illustrated book. It had to be accessible. That was one thing that my father emphasized before he passed away, is that science needed to work harder to deliver valuable informations to the masses in ways that they can see themselves, we can see ourselves. So I knew that he had more science and philosophy and information. So I thought it should be illustrated. So I reached out to my friend Calum Heath in the UK and said, "Would you be interested?" And he said, "Well, yes, Bill, I think we should give it a go."
Awesome, thank you. And Chaser is actually a very strong presence throughout the book. So please, can you tell us about her?
Well, Chaser was first and foremost a family member. She was my father's dog. And he got Chaser when he was 76 years old. It had been 10 years since his heart dog had sort of passed away, and he thought he'd never get another dog. Um, and he'd worked with dogs in his Wofford College classroom for over 25 years, and his goal had been to teach them human language. But he he'd gone about it the wrong way. So when he got Chaser, he started attending, well, before he got Chaser, attending border collie trials. And it was really the border collie farmers that sort of pointed him in the right direction. He needed to pay attention to this more salt of the earth approach and actually what brought these dogs joy and meaning. So when he got Chaser, that was his goal, was to teach her human language. And he knew where he had gone wrong previously, and boy, he got it right with Chaser. She loved playing, and he used that love of play for her, teaching her the names of over 1,000 objects.
Which is just incredible.
Yes, and so when their research was published and went globally viral, it shocked everybody. And so Chaser reached sort of international recognition and fame through learning the names of her toys.
And one of the things that you say in your book is that every dog is an individual. So I'm wondering if you can use Chaser as an example to illustrate this.
You know, dogs are just like humans. Everybody kind of has their thing, and the same is true for dogs. Dogs have certain similar traits, like they all like smelly things and to roll in dead things, and they like to chase things. So those are some commonalities, but each dog has their own personality. And Chaser, we discovered, was a very confident dog, but she was not assertive like our previous dog. So we really have to pick up on these little cues that dogs are giving us. She loved to play with children. She did not like other dogs. She would stoically tolerate the perfunctory sniffing of the bums, but you could tell from her body language, she just was not, she was frozen and not comfortable with it. So she was a soft dog, not a hard dog. She wasn't going to be adventurous like our previous dog, Yasha, but she was very social. So everybody should pick up on what their dog is trying to tell them through their body language and their vocalizations. And we give you those tips in the book in ways that you can identify who your dog is.
I love that. And you saw Chaser being trained throughout her life. So if someone wants to get started on teaching their dog to understand words, do you have a tip based on Chaser's story?
Um, sure. We've seen using my dad's methods. They're super simple. And the way Chaser learned was through a process called errorless learning. And this is hosting a situation where she could not make a mistake. So when he would present a new toy, there were no other toys in the room, and he would say, Chaser, this is blue. And then he'd put blue on a piece of furniture and he'd say, find blue. And she'd go over and she'd take blue, catch blue. And so he would play games and keep only using this one toy for like 3 days. And so she would reach the point, and you can reach the point with your dog when they can find it in another room, then you can go on to another toy. But keep it very simple and reinforce that name constantly.
I think she was very clever and had an amazingly clever family too. So the book is illustrated by Calum Heath, who's an illustrator for the New York Times. And I know you've got a workshop coming up actually on producing nonfiction books with an illustrator. But what was it like for you working with an illustrator on this book?
Oh gosh, it was so amazing, and especially someone as creative as Calum. I, it I would just give him the prose, whatever I was working on, and he would turn it into something that I would have never imagined. He's just so creative, and it really brings the message home. It's also such an easy way for people to learn, because when learning is fun, it happens rapidly. So that's what we were going for in the book. And Callum, there, I don't think there were maybe one illustration out of probably 175 that I said, it's not quite right. And sometimes we would work through them, where I'd say, give me a little more of the dog instead of the human. But he's so brilliant. It was a lot of fun working with Callum.
Good. And it's a really fun book. And I think the illustrations and the text work so well together. That's really, really nice. And I know that you've prepared a short reading for us. So please, can we hear from you reading from the book?
Sure. So this is part of the book is Tell Me a Story. Every chapter has Tell Me a Story, which are snippets from um, my life and with Chaser and our other family dogs. So, all right, many times we hear my dog doesn't like to play with toys, but not so fast. I had a friend who brought his new 5-month-old pit bull rescue puppy to my house, and he was a little concerned because she didn't like to play. So I asked him, "How do you play with her?" And his response was, "Well, I don't know. We bought her all these toys and she's just not interested in them." So I immediately had two thoughts. First, was she sick? And secondly, this is so sad. So Ruthie was a large, floppy-eared, dark brown puppy, and she had the sweetest chocolate eyes and a gentle spirit. She had no problem with eye contact and would wag her tail, but she was not an assertive dog. I didn't have any toys in my Brooklyn garden, but I did have a pine cone. And when I picked it up, I started tossing it in the air. Then I'd drop it, kick it, pick it up and run with it, and toss it again. And sure enough, Ruthie was watching. The second time I dropped it, she raced for it too. And I let her grab it and enthusiastically said, "Ruthie, you have pine cone. I want pine cone." The cat and the mouse game began. I kept repeating pine cone, and she was jumping, running, and chasing pine cone until I got worn out and we had to take a break. We did this a few more times, and not only had she unleashed her joy of play, but she had learned the name pine cone. Her owner also discovered how to play with his dog.
Love that. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. It's so nice to hear you read from the books. That's gorgeous. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Christy and Wendy to come back on camera, please, and hand over to Christy.
Hello. Wonderful. Okay, so I do have some questions, Wendy, for you. Before this, you had written a best-selling book about parenting the connected child, as well as a guide for those with adopted children, raising the challenging child. So how did the switch to a dog book come about?
Well, interestingly, my husband and I adopted a little dog right about the time that I finished working on that first book, and I was struggling so much, and the puppy guides actually were not helping me, and I hit a moment. Honestly, I asked my husband if we could bring this dog back to the pound. I mean, I was so desperate, and I didn't have the strategies, and he still believed in her. And in desperation, really, I went and looked at the parenting uh, book that I had just helped write. And it gave me inspiration and some ideas and just a new perspective and more compassion. And I found that there was so many parallels and value in the wisdom they had for children. And so later working on another children, book for parenting children, I found more different kinds of insights. And so it just led naturally because then I wanted to know, am I making this up? Am I imagining this? Or, is there any science behind this?
Yeah, I actually, I read your book as an ebook, and I highlighted in one of the pages about, it was a line, something like, this wasn't a puppy who was trying to, be evil or bad. This was a puppy who was struggling with unmet needs. And I was like, oh, I love that so much. Struggling with unmet needs. It was just like, as a dog professional, I was like, yes, that is such a perfect reframe. So your book draws heavily on research on parenting styles. Can you tell us what parenting styles?
Yes, it's an interesting way that experts have come to, researchers look at the different approaches that parents use. So there are two kind of measures that they look at. They look at how responsive the parent is, and often that's thought of as nurturing. Um, um, so how responsive a parent is to the child's needs and own perspective. And then on the other measure is how demanding that parent is and how much they insist on rules or guidelines. And so if you take a low level or high level of each of those two measures, you map them and you get 4 quadrants, essentially. You get 4 styles. And one of the styles is neglectful because you're not either, you don't demand much and you don't give much. And so that's the least. But then you have these other variations, and one, for example, is a very permissive parent, and they are all about indulging the child and meeting their needs in a particular way, but they don't have expectations uh, of demands. They don't set rules or guidelines the same way. The other extreme is where they're all about rules. They're all about guidelines. They're like, this is my way and that's it. And that's considered authoritarian style. The fourth style, which can be confusing because the words sound very similar, is authoritative. And that's where you give a lot of nurturing and you're very responsive to what the needs and the experience of the little one are. But you're also helping shape the expectations. You're setting guidelines, you're establishing limits, but you're doing it in a compassionate way. So it's this blend of both of those dimensions, and that's called authoritative. In my book, I like to call it therapeutic, just to help distinguish it from the confusing, authoritarian, authoritative.
Right. And that actually leads very nicely into the next question, which is about authoritative parenting styles. And when I first read these questions, I was like, Zazie, I really dislike that word. Do we have to, both Zazie and I have this minor obsession with words and wording. And I think her entire PhD was on metaphor. So we often talk about language because it's just something that we're fascinated in. And I was like, here's this word, and the dog world is so characterized by conflict over, words and techniques. And I was like, oh, do we have to ask this question? And so we ended up coming to sort of the decision that I would bring it up as there's a problem. There's sort of a problematic, this word is problematic for me when I say it, but I still wanted to ask you about it. So for dog guardians, why is this authoritative? Or I love your revision, calling it therapeutic. What does that mean when it comes to dogs?
So it's something that really a lot of expert dog handlers do already. I mean, what it is it's finding win-wins, essentially. Right? It's recognizing the underlying need and finding a way to meet that need kindly and effectively, but also helping guide the animal toward behavior that is, more welcome and suitable for a situation. So it can be something as simple as a redirect. You have the dog, a puppy, chewing on your furniture, and instead you offer them this chew toy. The puppy's happy, you're happy, and it's also learning that's not the place to chew. This is a good place to chew, and so you're meeting both those criteria of you're demanding a certain thing, but it's not in a mean way. It's in a supportive way, and you're also nurturing them as best you can. And you can, if you look closely at a lot of different techniques, there's thought behind them that really blends those things. And as we know, balance is another word that can get really complicated in the dog world. So I like to say blend, these two factors to achieve a therapeutic approach. It's kind of like giving the animal the benefit of the doubt, right? That's really like understanding that they're not out to get you. They're trying to meet their needs and they're trying to communicate something. And we sometimes gloss over that because we're so focused on our own needs. So we just want to bring those two more to equal level.
I love how it brings the human, and I think we're going to get even more into this with Carri's book, but it sort of is an acknowledgement that us as the human component matter too. I don't want my furniture necessarily being chewed. I mean, that ship has sailed in my house, but it's okay as a human to be like, I really wish my dog wouldn't do this, but how. And I love how instead of saying, how do I get my dog to not do that? It's like, how do I meet my dog's needs in a way, that allows them to still be a dog and have all of these behaviors. But just sort of giving them the option of doing it in a way that doesn't impinge upon us as beings, in the relationship.
Right. As a parent, that's the job of a parent, right? To just kind of help steer everybody in the household to general well-being. And so there are certain expectations. If you're in that family, you're not walking on the dining room table, but you still eat,
Right. So you have a section in your book where you consider training methods from a parenting styles perspective. So can you say something about that?
Yeah, I found this measure is very interesting. When we look at a training technique, we can ask ourselves, is this is this serving the dog's needs more or my needs more? And can we find again a win-win situation where it more effectively serves us both? So um, you can analyze different kinds of equipment, for example, thinking about um, if this is a really punitive device, then that's probably more about my needs than uh, addressing, you know, the experience of the animal. It's not as responsive to their needs. So it would automatically make me step back and say, well, then what can I find that does meet my needs, but also respects and honors the needs of the animal? See? So that would turn out to be a therapeutic choice, one that meets both those criteria.
Right. I love it. I love that frame. So how have your own experiences with pets influenced the writing of this book?
Yeah, well, that first puppy, Hazel, she was the catalyst for all of this. And then there's Bernie sitting back there. He is like chapter 2 in that whole experience. And you know, it's a constant. I guess it's humbling, right? Parent. I haven't been a human parent, but even pet parenting, that there are no recipes, and that's part of what I try to convey too. Is that we we try to just accommodate all these different needs. Um, I like to put it in the package of what I call hearts parenting or hearts approaches that heal the body, enrich and optimize the brain, appropriate environments with felt safety, respectful and secure relationships, um, teach sensitively and positively, and then support the individual. And if you put all that together, which is what expert parents do, um, then that helps me think about these pets. Uh, and, am I giving them what they need? Well, Hazel's passed, but Bernie, Bernie gets the best of what I can give here now. But it's a wonderful learning experience. And of course, we all love our dogs so much and our cats.
Yeah. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Or
Thank you. And Wendy, I know you've got a reading prepared for us, so we would love to hear you read from the book, please.
Sure. I'm going to just share a few pages right from the beginning of the book. Chapter 1, My Puppy Problem. A few years into our marriage, my husband decided that what our home needed, beyond the big screen TV dominating our living room, or the second rescue cat he'd convinced me to adopt, was a puppy. Yes, a puppy. Others might have greeted this prospect with delight, or at least confident understanding of the next steps, but not me. I had lived with easygoing grown dogs and enjoyed walking and caring for them, but I had never raised a puppy or infant of any kind, and frankly was not eager to try. I was busy racing toward a work deadline, and if past experience with my night owl husband and our distribution of cat box duties was any indication, the less glamorous, more hands-on aspects of puppy care would fall to me. My protests slammed right up against Norm's sentimentality for his late beloved hound. The dog was long gone, but his likeness festooned my husband's office. There were images of Flash as a puppy in Norm's arms, as a teenager sprawled on a couch, as a mature basset with long ears draped across a field of Texas bluebonnets. I never really stood a chance. Finally, I agreed to visit a breeder. We were welcomed by a pair of drooling basset hounds with plate-sized paws and yards of ears, eager to greet us. Outside on the back porch, we sidestepped yellow puddles and scattered brown piles to meet the pups. They were friendly and cute enough, but I kept thinking about those massive, drooling adults. So much slobber, and one false turn of a stout creature like that would torpedo my bad knee. We thanked the breeder and went on our way. My husband took the rejection of his beloved breed in stride. If a puppy was involved, he was flexible. So we browsed possibilities, oohing and eyeing at standard poodles and Wheaten Terriers. Somehow, each time we took an interest, further research revealed that the breed had a reputation for killing cats, was prohibitively expensive, or both. Keeping our cats safe added anxiety to the choice. I didn't intend to put little Sven or Gracie in harm's way, but we were at a loss for a clear breed winner, so decided to explore local shelters for a small mixed breed puppy, preferably something that would grow to less than 30 pounds to give my knee and the cats a fighting chance. Visiting shelters near Dallas took a strong stomach. Harsh barking echoed the hallways. Antiseptic, musky smells enveloped us. Row after row of sad faces squinted in the dim hallways, many lethargic and indifferent, even earless, hulking survivors of the fighting ring. Some of the animals, penned together, began snarling and snapping at one another when I approached. These visits were so depressing that Norm didn't have the heart to join me. It was like looking for a needle in a gloomy haystack. Then one day, I discovered a squirmy, dappled dachshund mix awaiting release for adoption. Let out to meet me, she wriggled and licked my hand and rolled over in friendly greeting. Suddenly, I was all in on the puppy adventure.
I love that. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And since I myself took a long time finding a dog who would get on with cats, I totally get that as well. So thank you so much. That beautifully sets up the premise of the book that you wrote too. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Professor Westgarth to come on camera, please.
Hello.
Thank you. Now, your book, The Happy Dog Owner, is a little bit different because your focus is on the dog guardian and how they can be happy. Why did you decide to take this approach?
Mainly because there's many fabulous books out there, including yours, that have really focused on the dog side of this. But there's two sides to this coin. It's a dog. Oh, most dogs, at least in our society, have owners, and it's a relationship. And what I loved about Wendy's book is that first chapter just totally sets up how hard it is as a dog owner, especially when you get a puppy, and we just don't talk about this enough. So yeah, I wanted to talk about, yes, the dog welfare side of things, but also the human side of things, what we need to know and expect when we're getting a dog. Those of us that work with people and their dogs know that it doesn't always work out like the fairy tales and unicorn stories about these wonderful dogs that people have, and how cute it is on Facebook and Instagram when they've got this puppy. So what do we want? What do we wish all dog owners knew to really help set them up? What sort of work do they need to put in before they get the dog, when they've got the dog, if they want to really enjoy that dog owning experience and have a happy dog, but also be a happy dog owner?
Yeah, and I think it's so true that so many people actually get a dog and then think, oh no, what have I done? Because they struggle in those early days and weeks. And although the title is The Happy Dog Owner, I think it's about happy dogs and happy dog guardians too in your book. But there's this widely held view that dogs improve our mental health. What's your take on that, and how can they do that?
It's a widely held belief. I certainly personally believe my dogs help improve my mental health. But when we go into the science around this in the book, it's actually not as straightforward as the media makes out. There's no actual conclusive evidence that having a dog positively impacts our depression levels or anxiety levels, for example, which is quite interesting. Part of that is down to the limitations of the study designs, the funding we've got in the area, in order to try and really tease out what's going on in terms of causal relationships. I think partly those of us who have tendencies towards anxiety and depression, we seek out the company of animals. So that complicates the evidence. Where we do have evidence is around social interactions. So dogs create a sense of community. They can encourage us to interact with others. There's a real icebreaker effect. If you go out and walk your dogs, you probably know of other dogs out there that you meet on your daily walks, and you'll say hi to the owners. You probably know the names of the dogs, but not the owners. And we feel less lonely because of that companionship, not just from them, but with the other people that they get us to interact with through dog training clubs and things, for example. They also do really fun stuff and make us laugh, which I think during the pandemic, our research with people who were owning dogs during the pandemic, it really brought them out. They were just something to focus on and a really fun distraction other than, the terrifying news. They give us a sense of purpose and responsibility as well. So, people who are struggling in different periods of their lives, they feel they do need to carry on because of the dog. You've got to get up, you've got to get out. And that's one of the main things. They do make us be more physically active. And we know getting out, being physically active, being around nature, those natural, nice environments, woodlands, fields, all those places that we really enjoy taking our dogs, that's really good for our well-being and that sense of mindfulness and being in the moment. So that's the mechanisms behind the impacts on our mental well-being, but they aren't going to solve your stress and worries and just take them away completely. And that's what we need to remember.
Mm-hmm. And the book draws a lot on your own research as well as your own experience as a dog trainer too. And you've got a flowchart for how to find a responsibly bred pedigree puppy in the UK. And I know this is something you've done research on, and we probably don't have time for all the details of the flowchart, but I wondered if you could please share us some quick tips on what people should look for if they're getting a puppy.
Yeah, so I have a breeder and dog behaviourist friend, Claire Stewart, to really thank for putting together the flowchart. Whether you can see, there's a nice little flowchart she made. People think that you just by being a good dog owner, then you can have a great dog. But we actually know the genetics, the line breeding, the very early socialization that the breeder is doing is so incredibly important to what then happens later on in that dog's life when it's with you. So it's really important to find a good breeder, but it's a minefield. So it's kind of a flow chart with some of the, guiding you through questions to ask, what to look for, and some of the red flags that you may make you want to consider inquiring more or even walking away from that litter, such as what sort of health testing has been done. Obviously, that varies between breeds as to what needs to be done, but how to then interpret those health tests for different breeds. What are things like responsible breeding practices, such as the puppies must all be, in the UK at least, they need to be microchipped before they leave the breeder. They need to be at least eight weeks old. The dam should be between 2 and 8 years old. You shouldn't be breeding from a really young dog or a really old dog. How many litters have they had? And just finding out how interested is the breeder in you and what sort of life you're going to give that dog. Because if they aren't being incredibly careful about who they want their dogs to go to, then that's a red flag that they're not really in it for the purpose of breeding really nice dogs for people. They're in it potentially just, for the money.
Yeah. So that's really important to know. And in the book, you suggest 3 important things that every dog should learn. So how did you decide which 3 behaviors you were going to pick as the most important ones?
So that was basically having done taught lots of dog training classes and worked with owners over the years. What is it that I can tell that they're really wanting when they come to those classes or when they're asking for help? So mainly they want to be able to go for a walk without being dragged around. So they want, a nice, pleasant experience. That's probably why they got a dog, this idea of these lovely, relaxing walks, which can be great. So loose lead walking, heel work, things like that. They also want to be able to let their dog off the lead. My research shows that watching your dog running around off the lead, off the leash, is one of the real vicarious pleasure, joyful moments of dog ownership. They won't be able to do that without worrying that they're not going to be able to get the dog back or it's going to chase squirrels and things. So recall training, what's the basics of that? And then the third one is something that I find the most useful in my daily lives with dogs. I rarely ask them to sit down, stay, anything like that. But the thing that's really useful is them having some control over what they want to do and what you want them to do, controlling their impulses, and to be able to just be patient just for a second whilst we do stuff before we're ready to move. So the wait cue, can you be able to ask your dog to just wait there for a second? Right, okay, now you can jump out of the car, or okay, now you can go and run around that field.
Yep. And those aren't the only training plans that you've got in the book, because you've also got plans for behaviors like opening doors and reminding the guardian to take their medication, and training and alert behavior. So it's a really practical book. And can you give us a few pointers on training and alert?
Yeah, so I wanted to have some training ideas in here for people that wanted to take it that bit further in having their dog assist them with their health needs. And a useful foundation for lots of different assistant service dog type tasks is an alert. So you can use it for things like medical detection, or maybe if you're deaf, you could use that to help you know about when someone's at the door, ring the doorbell, for example. One of the things I notice that people struggle with, they think their dog is telling them that something's happening, but it's not very clear that the dog is indicating. So you need to pick a behavior that your dog, it's really clear. They're not just staring at you a bit and you're thinking, are they alerting? Are they not? A brief nudge of the nose, perhaps you're not going to notice. When I worked as an assistance dog trainer, two of the ones we generally use for a little dog was to jump up and really scrabble at you with their front paws. So they like doing that. With a big dog, to sit and clearly put one paw on you is another way of doing that. So basically, you teach that behavior you want through luring, through rewards, getting really confident at doing that particular behavior. And then you need to introduce some sort of cue, perhaps a sound or a word that means do that behavior. And then finally, you introduce that task, whatever that situation is. So, for example, the doorbell. So you get someone to ring the doorbell. If you wanted your dog to tell you about the doorbell, you get them to see your friend to ring the doorbell, and your dog would run to the door going, "Oh my God, it's amazing, there's someone at the door." But then sort of be like, "Come on." And then you could bring in your little sound or cue or whatever that means alert me. And then they go, "Oh no, I'll come and alert you." And then they can take to the door. So kind of back chaining that in. And having a helper can be really useful through all of this.
Yeah, and I love that the way that this brings together your practical experience and the science as well. That's great, thank you. And I know that you prepared a short reading from the book, so we would love to hear you read from the book, please.
Yes. So it's from the introduction. So I start talking about two of my dogs. Jazz was a Spaniel cross, and Ben was a collie. So one frosty early morning, Jazz, Ben and I were out on our usual walk coming home from the woods. I was in a bubble of my own thoughts when I noticed that the dogs, Ben in particular, were acting really strangely, softly whining and edging into the road. Initially confused and, to be honest, a bit annoyed by them, I decided to follow their lead after they persisted in this behaviour. They took me across the road to a house where, as it turned out, they had found an injured elderly woman who'd fallen over out of sight on her driveway. I was able to help her inside and get medical attention. Without my dogs, who knows how long it would be before someone helped her. This personal experience supports the scientific evidence that our dogs not only impact our own lives, but also the people around us. Dog owners often report that their animals relieve stress and help to reduce feelings of loneliness. No mean feat in a world where so many of us are increasingly disconnected from meaningful social interaction, conducting much of our work or social life online and through screens. This became even more apparent during the coronavirus pandemic lockdowns, during which I wrote this book, and our pets proved to be a great source of emotional support throughout this unprecedented time. However, before we skip off into the sunset with our very own Lassie, it is vital that we understand this. The mere fact of dog ownership is not enough to transform you and your dog's health and happiness. The media are to be believed. Owning a dog is a perfect antidote to the recent pandemics or the ongoing epidemics of obesity, heart disease, and depression. Surprisingly, though, science has so far failed to find strong evidence of a causal relationship. So why are these benefits not universal? Fascinatingly, while some studies do show that dogs have positive effects on our mental and physical well-being, other studies show no difference at all, and still others even point to relatively poorer health among dog owners. Deeper analysis shows that part of the problem seems to result from the extraordinary fact that many dog owners don't walk their dogs at all. Furthermore, it seems that not all owners always find their dogs so wonderful to be around. In today's society, we expect our dog to be our best friend, childminder, dress-up doll, entertainment, protector, and wingman. We expect them to be always by our side, except when we're out at work for 12 hours a day, and to be entirely tolerant of everything modern life can throw at them. Given that so many of us are struggling to cope, it's no wonder our dogs are too. With all these developments, it's clear that we have not just a moral responsibility, but also a legal one to rethink what's happening. We must invest time and effort into training our dogs and, in as much as we can, prevent issues from occurring first. We must also distinguish the hype from the evidence, all of which this book intends to achieve. It's time to reevaluate what we want from our dogs and what they need from us. To me, it seems clear that only a certain kind of dog ownership really benefits the owner's health. This can only happen if the dog is trained correctly and the owner does certain activities with it. To achieve this, we need to make intentional choices around where we get our dogs from, how we train them, and what activities we do with them. You only get out what you put in. In simple terms, only a happy, obedient dog leads to a relaxed, healthy owner. My mission in The Happy Dog Owner is to teach the reader how to maximize the benefits of dog ownership and minimize the risks. Completing some simple training tasks is essential, but the training must be based on mutual trust, respect, and caring. It must use kind methods and create the right kind of relationship between an owner and their dog. Although our dogs might already be enhancing our well-being, there's always more we can do to improve our relationship with them and increase the benefits they can bring. In an ideal scenario, a synergistic relationship develops in which the well-being of both dog and owner is optimized, resulting in improved levels of happiness and health for both parties. What's not to like?
What's not to like indeed. Thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that you used the pandemic lockdowns to write this book. It's got so much practical advice in it, and it's great that it's also evidence-based as well. Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask everyone else to come back on camera, please. And a reminder to the audience that if you have questions for any of the authors, you can type them into the Q&A box so that it's easy for us to find them at the end. And I have a quick question for each author first before we go to the audience questions, because I want to ask about what brings you hope for the dog-human relationship. And I'm going to send this question to Pilley first, please.
Oh, well, first of all, the fact that people love their dogs. We're really seeing a lot of that now, just globally. And the past decade, we've had more research about dogs than any part of our history. So this is really pointing us in the right direction. And so I believe in science, and I believe in the mystical, and those are coming together.
Great. Thank you. Wendy, what brings you hope?
Seeing all the different approaches that practitioners are taking now that are really weaving in understanding of trauma, understanding of attachment, understanding of neurobiology, understanding pain that's undiagnosed. There's so much wealth of information that we're getting, and like Carri here has helped, contribute to this body of knowledge too. Just so much we're learning that we can bring to bear to help.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Professor Carri, what brings you hope?
I was thinking very similar things, really. That greater awareness and enthusiasm that dog owners seem to have now. They really are trying to do the best for their dog. They might not always get the right information, but the availability of equipment now for dogs and their owners, and educational tools such as this webinar is just phenomenal compared to what it was 20 years ago. Just think now, 20 years ago, all of the dogs that used to walk around on thin choke chains, and now pretty much every dog you see is on a harness. And there's, so many different types of harnesses when there was basically one for a long time. It's just, there's so much more choice out there for dog owners who are really trying to do the best for their dog.
Awesome. Thank you. I think the answers to these questions, I'm asking them of every author, and I think they're really cheering people up. It's good for us all to hear it. So I'm going to turn over to Christy to moderate the questions from the audience, please. And there is still time for people to type questions.
Yeah, for sure. So the first question is from Rebecca, and it's actually a question about language. So of course we love that. And it's a question about your choice of the word owner instead of guardian. And it made me think, Zazie, do you remember who was, I've read so many dog books that I just can't even remember who, but someone recently, and one of the authors was saying, it was just like discussing this, like there's guardian, there's owner. I don't love either of these words, but I'm going to go with X, Y, Z. One of the authors from the previous session said that.
I can't remember who said that.
I can't either. But, so this is an interesting question, because as someone who I blog about dogs, sometimes I use both words, and and not on purpose. I don't love guardian either, but I don't love owner either. But yeah, so did you make this as like a specific choice, or this is for Carri?
Yeah, I presume that's for me. Yeah, I'm sure I'm looking through my book trying to find the bit that I must have written about why I chose to use owner, because I'm sure I must have said that. I agree. I think it's the best word that we have. I don't particularly like guardian either, because I don't know. I think owner shows that you are taking ownership of your responsibilities to this animal. It's also, in terms of legal, you are the dog owner legally. You have responsibilities. I also wanted something that's accessible. I do a lot of science, but I've also worked a lot with owners over the years, and I just wanted to write something that people would connect with and understand, and they think of themselves as dog owners generally. It's similar to the debate that we have about, what are dogs to us? Are they our children? Are they our pets? As a recent paper that I've got coming out, I've had to change the word pet to companion animal the whole way through because of what the reviewer wants, and I kind of understand where they're coming from. But people know them as pets. They think of them as pets, and they think of themselves as owners. So I just wanted to connect with people in that way. And really, at the end of the day, I don't care what people call it, as long as they're doing a good job.
Right. Oh, the language stuff is always an interesting conversation, I think. So next up, we have a question for Pilley. So Kat says, I'd love to hear a bit more about what your graphic book does for understanding all sorts of dogs and their people. I've been thinking so much about what different dogs enjoy and how you can find those things and bring out dogs' strengths without forcing a square dog into a round hole. Okay, please don't imagine that. Thanks for that great question, Kat.
Yes. So she's talking about the illustrations. I'm not sure I understand the question.
The question was, and Kat, go ahead and clarify in the audience. It's about what the graphic component does to people.
Yes. Yeah, no, it really puts it sort of in black and white. And so like phrases that like my father would say, before you work with your dog or any other animal, you have to respect the other mind involved with you in the process, and when Calum comes up with these beautiful illustrations, it's just hits you right here, and it makes sense. So a lot of people are also very visual. And Calum has a real way of like putting that little something extra that even makes me think. I actually was looking at some of the illustrations probably about 6 months ago, and I'm like, oh my God, I never saw that. And I'm thinking, there's so many layers there. So, it really gets you thinking in a different way. Everybody's different. Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some people are sensory. related. So the book tries to cover a couple of these things.
Yeah, for sure. I love the artwork in the books that we're talking about in this literary festival. I think it's been very useful. Like there was the Katie language book that we were looking at, or that we were talking about.
Oh yeah.
Or the day before, or someday, Tuesday, I think. It's so useful for humans to look at a picture, it's so much more evocative, I think. So I do have a question also for Wendy. So because you have this crossover between parenting and parenting pets or owning a dog, I was wondering, do you come across parents who have this therapeutic relationship with their kids, but then have a totally different relationship with their dog? And is there like a way that you can use that? And sometimes I see that in the dog people that I work with, is that they might be wonderful to their kids, but then they hold on to these weird ideas about their dog. So is that something that you come across, and how do you sort of
Well, I don't personally work directly with this type of client, but it is a very provocative question. And one of the questions that perhaps you could raise with them is to think about their own childhood and, the handling that either they saw with other animals when they were younger, because they may be, they learned that and it was patterned for them. And it may be that with the children, they made an extra effort to bring have more modern understanding, and yet don't realize that there's so much in common. That's the thing that just blew my mind when I was researching this, is that there's so much science that shows us this relationship between humans and dogs is a really unique one. I mean, they evolved together, and there is a very great similarity to parent-child relationship. And so maybe there's a way to bring that out for the clients to help them understand that nature, actually installed these really amazing mechanisms where the dog cares about what the people, they want to please the people often. They want to connect it. There's some research showing that the dogs will be drawn to people at least as much as dogs in circumstances. So that we're the leader, and that's a fraught term too, but we are the parental figure in a sense, more than a lot of people realize. So maybe there's a way to bring out, that special evolutionary bond. It's different. Really, dogs really special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that sort of be curious about the way that you were taught, about dogs versus how we know we should be, interacting with dogs, for them to be joyful and for us to be joyful too. I think that's really. So the last couple minutes, I very quickly want to do a round robin. This is a literary festival, I think, and Zazie and I both love hearing about authors' processes. So I would be curious about everybody, just like, how did you write this book? Did you have a whole idea about what all the chapters were going to be? Did it unfold as were you an editing fiend? So just we like to sort of open the cover a little bit into your writing process. So I'm going to start with Pilley.
Oh Lord, I had no idea. I had a bunch of stuff that I'd written, and I just, when the spirit would move me, I would just write, and so, and I encourage everybody to just write. And then writing, yeah, so I had no idea. And then at the end, Calum and I were actually piecing things together and trying to put in, and of course, my publisher, I had to put in the chapters. So that forced me to get organized. And I'm like, oh yeah, this will fit here. So it's writing is a pretty inspired and arbitrary and sometimes painful process. So, yeah, it just, you end up figuring it out as you go.
Perfect. Thank you. Carri?
Yeah, so over the years, I guess, I think in my head, I started to think of ideas. In my book, it's all based around stories. It's all situations that happened with my dogs or with someone else's dog, or a dog that I was working with, and then thinking about how, there's that story tells what's happening in that piece of scientific evidence. I would often write little notes in my phone, like voice notes as I was walking the dogs. I'd suddenly think of a paragraph that I thought sounded really good. But I basically just bullet pointed it out. Once I had ideas in my head, this is how I write. I bullet point, I draft, I redraft, I redraft. Unfortunately, I became a scientist and then realized all you do generally is write. And I wasn't a great writer. So it never comes out perfect. And I would rewrite a lot of it now. Some people are just brilliant writers and they can just come out with perfect paragraph straight off. That is not me. And it is totally normal to have to redraft. And you can even publish scientific papers and write books being that person.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. But Wendy, how was your writing experience for this book?
It was a little bit about what everybody else described. It's a jigsaw puzzle. It's almost like I feel like I'm chasing butterflies with a net, but the butterflies are things flying out of my head. And often those butterflies would fly out in the middle of the night and would wake me up. So it's but it's a really fun jigsaw puzzle and very illuminating and gratifying. And it was such an opportunity to speak to so many people. It was really a privilege to talk to so many folks who shared their stories.
Thank you. And unfortunately, those are all the questions we have time for. But this has been an absolutely wonderful session. It's been great to hear your answers to the questions. I've loved the readings. They were absolutely fantastic. For the audience, we would love for you to get the books from your local independent bookstore. You can support the authors by buying their books. And we've also shared links to Bookshop, which supports independent bookstores. So as a reminder, the books are The Happy Dog Owner. All of these books belong on every dog owner's bookshelf. For the Love of Dog by Pilley Bianchi and Tender Paws. And so someone in a moment after the webinar ends is going to win copies of these and also of my own book, Bark, The Science of Helping Your Anxious, Fearful or Reactive Dog, which is available for pre-order now. So thank you so much to Professor Westgarth, to Wendy Lyons Sunshine and to Pilley Bianchi for joining us today and for telling us about your fantastic books. Thank you to Christy for helping me run the session. And thank you to my publisher for some help behind the scenes. And thank you so much to our audience for coming and being such a fantastic audience. You can look for future BarkFest events on my website. If you haven't signed up yet, please do so. And just thanks to all of you. And this is not the end of the conversation because we will hope to find other ways to speak to these authors in the future. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Positive Posting Conversation. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to the show and write us a review via your podcast app. For the show notes, visit companionanimalpsychology.com. This show was produced by Zazie Todd. The music is Melody from Paris by Studio Le Bousse. See you next time.